Once again, operate the throttle to be sure of free movement.
If your vehicle's engine is carbureted, it is equipped with a power valve or power valve circuit that adds fuel to the engine during heavy load conditions. On Rochester, Carter, and other styles of carburetors that utilize a power valve piston or metering rods, failure symptoms would include sluggish engine performance under load, or a lean condition noticed by surging or bucking while driving down the highway. These conditions are commonly attributed to varnish buildup on the power piston inside the carburetor. This causes it to stick in the down position, creating a lean fuel mixture. To cure this problem, you must remove the air horn from the carburetor. Remove the air horn gasket and pop the power piston and metering rods up and out of their position. Be sure not to disturb or lose the small spring that sits below the power valve piston. Clean the outside of the power piston and metering rods with carburetor cleaner to remove varnish. Also, be sure to clean the piston well at the same time. Since partial carb disassembly is required to access this style of power piston and internal varnish deposits have been found, we suggest rebuilding the carburetor at this time. You will also probably damage the air horn gasket, which can only be purchased in a complete carburetor kit. For a complete demonstration of those procedures, view our chapter on carburetor rebuilding. On Ford and Holley carburetors that utilize a diaphragm type of power valve, failure symptoms would include poor fuel economy, sluggish engine performance due to a rich fuel mixture, and even black smoke out the tailpipe. A power valve failure of this type can often be attributed to an engine backfire. This style can be replaced without complete disassembly of the carburetor. On many Holley carburetors, the power valve is located inside the fuel bowl in the main metering block. On Ford vehicles, where carburetor removal is necessary, invert the carb over a funnel and gas can to drain the fuel out of it before disassembly. Then locate and remove the screws retaining the power valve cover. Fuel deposits inside the cover are an indication of a power valve diaphragm rupture. With the cover removed, you can use a large, about 1-inch wrench to loosen and remove the power valve. Compare the new and old power valves to be sure of correct replacement. On Holley performance carburetors, there will be a small 2- or 3-digit number stamped into the hex of the power valve. Make sure the number on the old one matches the number stamped into the new one. Position the new gasket on the new power valve and start it in the threads by hand to prevent cross-threading. Snug the power valve in place with the wrench, but be careful not to over-tighten it, as it is quite easy to do with a wrench that large. Then reposition the power valve cover and install the cover retaining screws. Snug them up with a screwdriver once all of them have been started in the threads. Reinstall the carburetor on the vehicle and test drive to be sure of correct diagnosis.
Now let's review servicing or replacing the power valve. Servicing your power valve system, if it utilizes a power piston and metering rods, commonly found on Rochester, Carter, and many import applications, requires you to partially disassemble the carburetor. Because damage to some of the gaskets will occur during this procedure that can only be obtained in a carburetor overhaul kit, we suggest rebuilding the carb at this time. With the power piston and metering rods removed, clean any varnish or deposits from them, as well as the piston well inside the carburetor. Once clean, reinstall the power piston and check for free operation. Reassemble the carb in the reverse order of disassembly, making sure to replace any gaskets that may have been damaged. On many Ford and Holley carburetors, a diaphragm type of power valve is used and can be replaced without complete carburetor disassembly. On the Holley type, the float bowl will have to be removed, and on the Ford type, a small cover and 4 retaining screws will have to be removed. Use an appropriate wrench on the hex part of the power valve to remove it. Install the new power valve and gasket, being careful not to over-tighten it with the large wrench. Reinstall the float bowl or cover and tighten the screws appropriately. Start the vehicle and test drive it for proper operation.
The accelerator pump circuit in your carburetor adds an extra shot of fuel each time you step on the gas pedal to bridge the fuel delivery gap between idle and cruising RPMs. The accelerator pump itself is located internally or externally on the carburetor and is operated via linkage connected to the throttle plates. Symptoms of a failing accelerator pump include a hesitation during acceleration from a stop sign after the engine is fully warmed up, a hesitation during acceleration when attempting to enter a freeway or while passing another vehicle, or even an external gas leak near the carburetor. Before condemning the accelerator pump as your problem, make sure the entire ignition system, spark plugs, distributor cap and rotor, and spark plug wires are all in good operating condition, and check the ignition timing to be sure it is adjusted to the correct specification. If the engine is in good tune, you may then consider replacing the accelerator pump. The only tools you will need to replace an externally mounted accelerator pump is a screwdriver or 1/4-inch drive socket set. Externally mounted accelerator pumps are commonly found on Ford and Holley carburetors. To replace this style of accelerator pump, you may or may not have to remove the carburetor from the vehicle. For our demonstration, we chose to have the carburetor already removed. First, if you are going to completely remove the pump cover and the accelerator pump linkage has more than one possible position, mark its location before disconnecting the linkage. Remove the 4 screws retaining the accelerator pump cover to the carburetor and position the cover aside and out of your way. Then, with the aid of a screwdriver, remove the old accelerator pump diaphragm and spring. If it is equipped with a rubber pump check valve, inspect it for damage, as a pump check valve can create similar drivability problems as would a bad pump diaphragm. If check valve damage is noticed, you will have to rebuild the entire carburetor, as that is the only way to purchase this item. If the check valve appears okay, reinstall the new pump and spring. Be sure the pump is positioned in the same direction as the old one was removed from. Reconnect the linkage to the pump cover and start all pump cover screws by hand to avoid cross-threading. Tighten all the mounting screws securely. On Rochester, Carter, and other styles of carburetors with internal accelerator pumps, you must partially disassemble the carburetor to access the pump. During disassembly, you will most likely damage some of the gaskets, so you will need to purchase a carburetor overhaul kit to obtain the accelerator pump cup and gaskets necessary. For a complete demonstration of carburetor removal and rebuilding procedures, review our video chapter on carburetor rebuilding. The actual accelerator pump is a small rubber cup that is mounted onto the accelerator pump shaft. With the spring removed, you can work the rubber cup off from the shaft. Use care when removing the cup from the old shaft, as the plastic lips that hold the cup in position are quite fragile. Reposition the new cup in the same direction as the old one. That's all it takes to replace your accelerator pump.
Now let's review the steps for replacing your accelerator pump. On some Ford and Holley carburetors, the accelerator pump is located on the outside of the float bowl, and disassembly of the carburetor is not necessary. Simply remove the 4 screws retaining the accelerator pump cover and remove the pump and cover from the float bowl. Position the new pump on the cover in the same direction as the old one, position the accelerator pump spring, and reinstall the cover and retaining screws. On Rochester, Carter, and many import carburetors, replacing the accelerator pump will require partial carburetor disassembly. Because damage to some of the gaskets may occur during the process, we suggest obtaining a carburetor kit and replace gaskets as needed. Once the carburetor is partially disassembled, you can remove the accelerator pump and plunger from the pump well. With a small screwdriver, remove the accelerator pump cup from the plunger. Some will have a clip and spring that will have to be removed, while others will be held in place with a round garter spring. Install the new pump cup in the same direction as the old one. Reinstall the accelerator pump in the pump well, and reassemble the carburetor in the reverse order of disassembly.